The great council hall was huge and filled with noise from hundreds of different alien voices. The walls were made of crystal that glowed with soft blue light, and the ceiling was so high it looked like it touched the stars. Ambassador Hyun-woo sat in the small human section near the back of the hall watching everything with calm eyes. He had been coming to these meetings for 15 years, and he knew how things worked here. The Velkari were talking again. Their blue skin looked almost purple under the crystal lights, and their long necks moved like snakes when they got excited. Today, their leader Zekmor was standing at the center, speaking platform, waving his forearms around like he was trying to catch flying insects. His voice was loud and harsh. "We demand more human colonies." The Velkari leader said, his forked tongue flicking out every few words. "The humans have too much space and they do not use it properly. They grow food and build homes when they could build factories and mines. We need those worlds for our expansion, Captain." So Min sat behind Hyun-woo, and she felt her hands making fists. Her dark uniform had many medals on it from peacekeeping missions across the galaxy. She had spent 20 years protecting other species and helping them solve their problems. But lately the aliens were getting more bold and more demanding. They seemed to think humans would always say yes to everything. The Thraxian representative was nodding his big insect head. His name was Click-Tor, and he was as tall as 3 humans standing on top of each other. His 6 legs made clicking sounds on the floor when he moved, and his mandibles were sharp enough to cut metal. When he spoke, his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. Yes, the humans always give us what we want because they are afraid of fighting," Click-Tor said, making more clicking sounds. "They have no warrior spirit. They only know how to grow plants and make peace treaties. We should take what we need from them." Hyun-woo listened to all this with the same calm expression he always had. But people who knew humans well could see something small changing in his eyes. The muscles around them got a little tight and his breathing became slower and deeper. These were signs that a human was getting ready for something important. More alien voices joined in. A red-skinned Gorvani delegate stood up and pointed at the human section with his 3-fingered hand. "The humans control the richest farming worlds in this sector of the galaxy," he said in his squeaky voice. "But they only use them to feed people. They should be mining those planets for rare metals and crystals instead." A tall gray Zentorian female made a sound like wind blowing through caves. "We have asked the humans nicely many times, but they always make excuses," she said. Her big black eyes had no expression in them. "They say they care about the people living on those worlds, but people can be moved. Resources cannot be replaced." Hyun-woo, finally, stood up slowly. The huge hall became quiet bit by bit as more aliens noticed that the human ambassador was on his feet. This was unusual. Humans almost never interrupted these meetings. They usually just listened and took notes and asked for time to think about things. "The colonies you are talking about have 12 million people living on them," Hyun-woo said in his steady voice. His words were clear and everyone could hear them, even in the back of the huge hall. "These are not empty worlds. These are homes where families have lived for generations. Surely we can find a solution that does not force anyone to leave their homes." The Velkari leader made a sound like laughing, but it was not a happy sound. "Families," he said with contempt. "Humans always talk about families and feelings and other weak things. We are talking about resources and territory and power. The strong take what they need from the weak. This is how the galaxy works." But Hyun-woo did not sit down. He stayed standing and looked around the hall at all the different alien faces. Some were big and scary looking. Some were small and covered in fur or scales. Some had too many eyes or arms or legs. But they all had the same expression now. They all looked like predators who had found easy prey. "The humans have been soft for too long," said another voice from somewhere in the crowd. "Your species talks about peace and helping others, but you never fight for anything. You just give and give until you have nothing left, Captain." So Min felt her heart beating faster. She wanted to stand up and tell all these aliens exactly what she thought about their demands. She wanted to remind them about all the times humans had saved their worlds from disasters, or stopped their wars, or helped them when they were hungry. But she stayed in her seat because that was her job. Hyun-woo looked directly at the Velkari leader. "Your people seem to think that because we choose peace we are not capable of anything else," he said quietly. That is an interesting assumption. The Thraxian made more clicking sounds. Are you threatening us, human? Your species has exploration ships and medical vessels. We have battle fleets and warrior castes. You cannot frighten us with words. For the first time in many years, Hyun-woo smiled, but it was not the kind of smile the aliens were used to seeing from humans. This smile was different. It was the kind of smile that made even the biggest predators in the room feel uncomfortable without knowing. Why, I am not threatening anyone, Hyun-woo said calmly. I am simply observing that you have made certain assumptions about humanity. You assume that our peaceful nature comes from weakness. You assume that because we prefer to help rather than harm, we are not capable of protecting ourselves when necessary. The hall was completely quiet now. Even the small aliens who usually whispered among themselves had stopped talking. Everyone was looking at the human ambassador and trying to understand. What was different about him, Captain? So Min gathered the documents and data pads from their table. She could feel the change in the air. Something important was happening, and she needed to be ready. The other human staff members also started packing their things, but they moved quietly and smoothly like they had practiced this many times. The Velkari leader waved his arms again. This is all just talk, he said loudly. You humans are good at talking, but you never do anything. We have made our demands clear. Give us the outer colonies or we will take them ourselves. You have 1 month to decide. Hyun-woo nodded slowly and picked up his own papers. I will take your message back to Earth, he said. But I strongly suggest that you think carefully about what you are asking for. You may not like the answer you receive. The Gorvani delegate made a snorting sound. What can Earth do to us? They have no armies, no weapons, no warrior tradition. They are farmers and doctors and teachers, not fighters, Captain. So Min, prepare our departure. Hyun-woo said to his aide. We need to return to Earth immediately. It seems the Galactic Council has forgotten something very important about humanity. As the human delegation walked toward the exit, the alien voices got louder and more excited. They thought they had finally won. They thought the humans would have to give them whatever they wanted. Some of them were already making plans for how to divide up the human colonies among themselves, but a few of the older aliens watched the humans leave with worried expressions. These were beings who had lived long enough to remember the early days when humans first joined the galactic community. They remembered stories their grandparents had told them about a species that had almost destroyed itself with weapons too terrible to imagine. The humans had been peaceful for 300 years, but peace was a choice, not a nature. And every choice could be changed when pushed too far. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when the most patient species finally ran out of patience. The emergency meeting room deep inside Earth Command was filled with tension. Admiral Tae-ho stood at the front of the room looking at the huge screen that showed the galaxy map. Red dots marked enemy fleet positions, and yellow lines showed their movement toward human space. The room was underground beneath several layers of steel and concrete, but everyone inside could feel the weight of what was happening above them. President Dayun sat at the head of the long metal table. Her gray hair was pulled back tight and her face showed the stress of leading humanity through its biggest crisis in 300 years. She had spent 40 years working as a diplomat before becoming president, and she had always believed that any problem could be solved by talking. But now she was learning that some problems could only be solved by being stronger than the people who wanted to hurt you. Colonel Yu Jin stood next to the admiral and pointed at different parts of the map. Our spy satellites show that the Velkari have moved 200 warships to the border of human space, she said in her clear military voice. They are not trying to hide their movements, they want us to see them coming. The Thraxians have added another 150 ships to their fleet and they are moving to attack positions as well. How many human lives are we talking about? President Da-yoon asked, even though she was afraid to hear the answer. The numbers on the screen changed as Admiral Tae-ho pressed buttons. On his control pad, conservative estimates show 2 billion civilians in the outer colonies. He said, his voice heavy with the weight of those numbers. But our intelligence suggests they are not planning to move these people to other worlds. They are planning to kill them all. The room became completely silent. Everyone in that room had dedicated their lives to protecting human civilization. They had worked for decades to build a galaxy where humans could be safe and peaceful. Now they We're being told that billions of people were going to die simply because other species saw humans as weak. Commander Minho stepped forward from his place near the back wall. He was the head of a department that most people did not know existed. The Department of Forgotten Sciences had been created after the Third World War to make sure humanity never forgot the terrible things it had learned about fighting wars. His job was to remember the things that everyone else wanted to forget. If I may, the commander said politely. The other species have made a big mistake about humanity. They think our peaceful ways come from being weak. They have never thought that maybe our peaceful ways come from being too strong. President Da-Yun looked at him with tired eyes that had seen too much. Explain that to me, Commander. Humanity did not become peaceful because we were born that way. Commander Minho said, walking closer to the table. We became peaceful because we were too good at war. We almost destroyed our entire planet in the Third World War, and we made a choice to never let that happen again. But we never forgot how to fight. We just chose not to. The people in the room started to understand what he was saying. Dr. Kyung-min was an old scientist who had spent 50 years studying how human minds worked. She had written books about why humans were different from other species and why they had been able to become the galaxies. Peacekeepers, Dr. Kyung-min stood up slowly, using her walking stick to help her. The galaxy has made a terrible mistake, she said in her quiet voice. They think that mercy means weakness. They think that because we choose to help, instead of hurt, we cannot defend ourselves when we need to. When a species that has spent 300 years learning how to make peace is forced to remember how to make war, the results are catastrophic. President Da-Yun finished the sentence. Everyone in the room knew she was right. The president looked around, the table at faces that had spent their whole lives working for peace. These were people who had built hospitals on alien worlds and stopped wars between different species. They were doctors and diplomats and scientists who believed that any problem could be solved without violence. But now they had to face the truth that sometimes violence was the only language that bullies understood. Admiral Tae-ho, how long do we have before they reach the outer colonies? The president asked. 6 months before. Their fleets reach the first human colonies, he answered. But ma'am, once we make this choice, there is no going back. The galaxy will never see us the same way again. Every species out there will know that humans are not just peaceful farmers and doctors. They will know what we are really capable of. President Da-Eun closed her eyes for a moment and thought about all the human children living on the outer colonies. She thought about their parents who had moved there to start new lives. She thought about the schools and hospitals and farms that these people had built with their own hands. She thought about how these families would die if humanity did not act. Then we make sure they never forget what happens when humanity's patience finally runs out, she said, opening her eyes. The room felt different now, like the air itself had changed. Everyone could sense that something important had been decided. Commander Minho nodded and touched his communication device. I will begin activating the old protocols, he said. The factories that make medical supplies can be changed to make weapons. The shipyards that build exploration vessels can build warships instead. The same people who have spent their lives helping others can learn to defend their families. Colonel Yu Jin looked at the map again. How long will it take to get our forces ready, she asked. That depends on how much we want to show them. Commander Minho replied. We can build enough ships to defend our colonies in 3 months. But if we want to make sure this never happens again, we need to show the galaxy what humanity looks like when we stop holding back. Dr. Kyung-min made a sound like she was thinking hard. The psychological impact will be enormous, she said. Other species have never seen humans as anything but helpful and peaceful. When they see us as we really are, when we stop pretending to be weak, it will change everything. President Da-Yun stood up and everyone else in the room stood up too. The meeting was over, and everyone knew what they had to do. The age of human patience was ending and the age of human strength was about to begin. Admiral, prepare the fleets, she ordered. Colonel, start moving our people away from the border worlds. Commander, wake up everything. We have been keeping asleep for 300 years. The galaxy wanted to see what happens when they push humanity too far. Now they are going to find out as people filed out of the room to begin the work that would change everything. The president stayed behind and looked at the galaxy map. The red dots showing enemy fleets looked smaller now somehow, like they did not understand what they had awakened. The transformation of human space began like a whisper that grew into a roar. Across hundreds of worlds, factories that had spent decades making medicine and food suddenly changed their purpose. The same machines that had created healing devices now built weapons of war. The same workers who had saved lives now prepared to defend them. Captain J1 stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and watched through the massive viewing window as the human fleet gathered in space around Earth. He had never seen so many warships in one place before. These were not the small exploration vessels that other species knew about. These were true battleships built with 300 years of hidden knowledge and suppressed military technology. Ships were beautiful and terrible at the same time. Their hulls were dark gray metal that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. Strange energy patterns moved across their surfaces like living things. Each ship was twice the size of the largest alien warships, and they moved through space with a grace that seemed impossible. For something so big, Sir Navigator Haye Jin called from her station. "We are receiving surrender messages from 17 different species. Word about our military. Buildup is spreading across the galaxy faster than we expected." Captain J1 did not look surprised. Too late for that. Now he said in a voice that sounded tired and sad. "They had 300 years to treat us with respect. Instead, they chose to see our kindness as weakness. Now they will learn what we really are." The bridge crew were all veterans who had served in peacekeeping missions across the galaxy. They had spent their careers stopping wars and protecting innocent people from violence. They had helped alien species rebuild after disasters and mediated conflicts between enemies. Now they were about to become the thing they had worked their whole lives to prevent. Engineer Dongwu looked up from his control panel. "Captain, the new weapon systems are fully charged and ready. The quantum disruptors are operating at maximum efficiency. All ships in the fleet report ready status." These weapons were humanity's greatest secret technology that could disable entire enemy fleets without killing anyone. The quantum disruptors could shut down any ship by disrupting the energy that held its systems together. It was a way to win wars without becoming monsters, but the galaxy would not know this. They would only see the most frightening fleet that had ever been assembled. Light years away, Ambassador Hyun Woo walked into the Galactic Council chamber for what he knew would be the last time. The huge hall was more crowded than he had ever seen it. Representatives from hundreds of species had come to watch what they thought would be humanity's final surrender. The air was full of excited alien voices, all talking about how they would divide up human territory. The crystal walls glowed brighter than usual, and the ceiling seemed to pulse with energy. The aliens were so confident that they had won that some of them were already arguing about which species would get which human worlds. The Velkari were demanding the richest farming planets, while the Thraxians wanted the worlds with the most advanced technology. Hyunwoo walked to the center of the hall where a small platform waited for him. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence as hundreds of alien eyes focused on the lone human. The platform lifted him up, so everyone could see him clearly, and bright lights made his dark uniform and calm face visible, even to the creatures in the back rows. "We have come to give our final answer," Hyun Woo announced, his voice carrying clearly through the massive space even without amplification. The Velkari leader, Zek Moore, practically jumped out of his seat with excitement. "Excellent," he said, his forked tongue flicking rapidly. "We assume you are here to discuss the terms of your surrender and arrange for the peaceful transfer of your colonies to their new owners." Hyun-woo smiled, but it was not the warm diplomatic smile that the galaxy had grown used to over 3 centuries. This was something completely different. This was the smile of a sleeping giant that had finally been awakened. The smile of a predator that had been pretending to be prey for far too long. "Surrender," he said, letting the word hang in the air. "No, we are not here to surrender. We are here to give you one last chance to remember something important about humanity. Something that you seem to have forgotten." The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Aliens turned to each other with puzzled expressions. Some of the smaller species looked nervous, but the bigger predator races just seemed amused by what they saw as human desperation. The Thraxian representative Kleektor stood up to his full intimidating height, his 6 legs clicking on the floor like machine gun fire. "You threaten us with words, human," he said, his voice grinding like stone on stone. "We have seen your ships. They are few and weak. Our fleets will crush them like insects. You have seen our exploration vessels." Hyun-woo corrected him, his voice still calm, but with something new underneath it. "You have seen our medical ships and our cargo transports. You have never seen our warships. You have never seen what humanity looks like when we stop being patient." More laughter filled the chamber, but it sounded less certain now. Some of the older aliens who remembered the early days when humans first joined the galactic community were not laughing. They remembered stories their ancestors had told them about a species that had nearly destroyed itself with weapons too terrible to imagine. A red-skinned Gorvani delegate stood up and pointed an accusing finger at Hyun-woo. "This is ridiculous," he squeaked. "Your species has no military tradition. You are farmers and doctors, not warriors. You cannot frighten us with empty promises." Hyun-woo looked around the chamber at all the alien faces staring at him. Some looked amused, some looked angry, but a few looked worried. Those few had realized that something was different about the human ambassador today, something that made even the most dangerous predators feel uneasy. "In exactly 6 hours our fleets will arrive at your homeworlds," Hyun-woo said quietly. "This is your last opportunity to reconsider your demands, your last chance to remember that humanity became peaceful by choice, not by nature." The laughter that followed was deafening, but it had a desperate edge to it. The aliens were laughing because they were afraid to do anything else. They had never considered that the quiet, helpful humans might be something other than what they appeared to be. "Then you have made your choice," Hyun-woo said as the laughter died down. "May every species in this galaxy remember this moment. May they all learn what happens when humanity's patience finally breaks completely." He stepped down from the platform and walked toward the exit. The alien voices rose behind him, but he did not look back. In 6 hours, the galaxy would learn the truth about humanity, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Valkyrie High Command Center was a massive room filled with screens and control panels that showed the positions of every ship in their fleet. Fleet Commander Vex Tar stood in the center of it all, his blue skin shining under the bright lights. As he watched the sensor displays with growing confusion, what he was seeing made no sense according to everything his people knew about humans. Impossible. He whispered, his long neck twisting as he looked from one screen to another. "Intelligence. Report said the humans only had merchant ships and exploration vessels. Where did these warships come from?" His tactical officer, a younger Valkyrie with darker blue skin, was shaking as he read the data from his instruments. "Sir, we are detecting energy signatures that do not match anything in our databases. Their shield technology appears to be decades ahead of our own. Their weapon systems are completely unknown to us." The approaching human fleet was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. The ships moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls seeming to bend light around them. Each vessel was enormous, but they glided through space with the grace of dancers. Their energy signatures were so advanced that Valkyrie computers could not even identify what kind of power sources they were using. Admiral Tae-ho stood on the bridge of the flagship UES Nemesis, watching the Valkyrie homeworld grow larger on the main screen. Behind him, his bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. Their faces were calm, but their eyes showed the weight of what they were about to do. These were people who had spent their careers helping other species. Now they were about to show those same species what happened when human patience ran out. "Open a channel to the Valkyrie fleet," he ordered, his voice steady and professional. The blue-skinned fleet commander appeared on the main screen, his earlier arrogance completely gone and replaced by barely controlled fear. "Admiral, surely we can negotiate," he said, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "There is no need for violence between our peoples. You had 3 centuries to negotiate." Admiral Tae-ho replied calmly, "You chose to mistake our patience for weakness. Now you will learn the truth about what humanity really is." The Valkyrie commander tried to project strength, but his fear was obvious. "We have 200 ships in this system to your 50, he said. "You cannot possibly win against those odds. Numbers were never our advantage, Admiral," Tejo said with something that might have been sadness in his voice. "Watch and learn." The first human ship in the formation was the UES Thunderbolt, a sleek vessel that looked more like a work of art than a weapon of war. It moved forward slightly, separating itself from the main fleet. A single beam of blue-white energy shot from its bow and struck the Velkari flagship. The massive enemy vessel, which had been bristling with weapons and energy shields, suddenly went completely dark impossible, breathed Fleet Commander Vextar, staring at his now powerless ship. No weapon can disable a dreadnought that quickly without destroying it completely. Human weapons can. Admiral Tejo replied, "We designed them to end wars, not to end lives, but make. No mistake, we could have designed them very differently if we had chosen to." One by one, the human ships fired their quantum disruptors. Each beam struck a Velkari vessel, and each vessel immediately lost all power. Their weapons went silent. Their shields collapsed and their engines stopped working. The crews inside were completely unharmed, but their ships were as helpless as floating rocks. In less than 10 minutes, 200 Velkari warships had been reduced to powerless hulks, drifting in space. The most powerful fleet in this sector of the galaxy had been defeated without a single shot fired in return. The humans had not even needed to use their full fleet to accomplish this impossible victory. Across the galaxy, other species watched in horrified fascination as the news spread. The Thraxians, who had been preparing their own assault on human space, suddenly found their fleets surrounded by human ships that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Their massive insectoid warriors, who had never known fear in battle, now trembled as they realized they faced something beyond their understanding. Commander Min Ho led the human fleet that surrounded the Thraxian homeworld. His ship, the UES Justice, hung in space above the planet's largest city like a dark angel of judgment. The Thraxian Hive Queen, a creature that had ruled through violence and terror for over 2 centuries, looked up at the human ships and felt something she had never experienced before: true helplessness. "Offer you the same choice your people denied us," Commander Min Ho transmitted to the Thraxian fleet. "Surrender now and your species will be treated with the mercy you refused to show humanity. Continue on your current path and learn why we chose peace over war." The Hive Queen had commanded millions of warrior drones in countless battles. She had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved entire species. But as she looked at the human fleet with sensors that could not even identify their technology, she understood that she was facing something that made her greatest victories look like children's games. "We surrender." She transmitted her voice, carrying across subspace to every corner of the galaxy. Within hours, the news had spread to every inhabited world. The 2 greatest military powers in the galaxy had been defeated in minutes without the humans firing a single shot in anger. The message was clear and unmistakable. Humanity had never been weak. They had been choosing to appear weak. And that choice had now ended. On distant worlds, alien leaders who had been planning their own attacks on human territory suddenly found themselves reconsidering. Species that had spent centuries taking advantage of human generosity now realized they had been like children poking a sleeping dragon with sticks. The galaxy had learned that the most dangerous predators were often those who chose to appear harmless. And they had learned that when such predators were finally forced to reveal their true nature, the results were beyond anything anyone could have imagined. In the depths of space, human fleets continued their work, disabling aggressive alien vessels and accepting surrenders from species who had thought they understood what humanity was. The age of taking advantage of human kindness was over. The age of respecting human strength had begun, but perhaps most importantly, the galaxy had learned that humans had not become peaceful because they were unable to fight. They had become peaceful because they were too good at fighting. And when that peace was threatened, they could remember very quickly exactly why they had chosen to put their weapons away in the first place. The Great Crystal Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. The same chamber that had been filled with arrogant alien voices demanding human colonies was now filled with representatives who spoke in whispers and avoided looking directly at the human delegation. The walls still glowed with their soft blue light, but somehow the atmosphere felt completely different. President Da Yun stood at the center podium, where Ambassador Hyun Woo had delivered his final warning weeks earlier. She looked out at hundreds of alien faces that now showed respect instead of contempt. The same species that had laughed at human weakness now listened to every word she spoke with careful attention. "We did not want this," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. "For 300 years we chose to be helpers instead of conquerors. We chose to build hospitals instead of weapons factories. We chose to mediate your conflicts instead of starting our own. We made these choices because we knew what we were capable of when we stopped holding back." The Velkari representative was a different individual. Now the old leadership had been removed by their own people after the humiliating defeat. Fleet Commander Vex Tar had been replaced by Ambassador Yel Nara, a female who spoke with genuine humility instead of arrogance. "Great humans of Earth, we did not understand," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "We thought your peaceful nature came from an inability to defend yourselves. We realize now how wrong we were. Our peaceful nature came from our ability to defend ourselves too well," President Dayun replied. "Many of you have heard stories about the Third World War that nearly destroyed our planet. We learned that our greatest enemy was not any alien species. It was ourselves. We became peaceful because we discovered that we were too dangerous to be anything else." She gestured toward the holographic displays that showed the disabled fleets floating powerlessly in space around alien homeworlds. The images were a reminder to every species present of what had happened when they pushed humanity beyond its limits. When you mistake mercy for weakness, when you confuse patience with cowardice, you force peaceful people to remember why they chose peace in the first place, President Dayun continued. "And that memory is always more terrible than the original violence because it comes with the knowledge of what that violence costs." Ambassador Hyun Woo stepped forward to address the assembly. The same calm diplomat who had warned them weeks earlier now carried an authority that made even the largest predators in the room listen carefully. "Every human child learns about the wars that almost ended our civilization," he said. "Every human adult chooses peace while knowing exactly what the alternative looks like." The Thraxian queen had traveled personally to this meeting, something that had never happened before in the council's history. Her massive insectoid form filled a specially built section of the chamber, and her multiple eyes focused intently on the human speakers. "We mistook your mercy for weakness," she said, her grinding voice carrying a tone of genuine regret. "We believed that because you chose to help instead of harm, you were incapable of protecting yourselves. We will never make that mistake again." "Good," President Dayun said, but her expression remained serious. "Because this is your galaxy's new reality. Humanity will return to our role as peacekeepers and mediators, but the peace we maintain will now be backed by the knowledge of what happens when our patience is exhausted. We hope we never have to show our true capabilities again, but every species here now knows that we can and will if necessary." The Gorvani delegate, a small red-skinned alien who had been among the most vocal and demanding human colonies, now spoke with a voice full of shame. "We have learned that the most dangerous beings in the galaxy are often those who appear the most gentle," he said. "We thought we understood strength, but we only understood violence. Real strength is choosing not to use your full power. Even when you could." Dr. Kyungmin, the elderly human scientist, stepped forward with her walking stick. Her presence commanded attention, because everyone knew she had spent decades studying why humans were different from other species. "The psychological impact of what has happened will last for generations," she said in her quiet voice. "Every species here has learned that appearances can be deceiving, that the quiet farmer working in his field might be more dangerous than the warrior brandishing his sword." Commander Min Ho addressed the military representatives who were present in the chamber. "The galaxy assumed that because we built schools instead of fortresses we had no understanding of warfare," he said, "but we understood it too well. We knew that the greatest victories come not from destroying your enemies, but from making them choose to become your friends." As the council session continued, representatives from dozens of species stood to speak. Each one acknowledged their mistakes and promised to treat humanity with the respect they should have shown from the beginning. The Zentorians apologized for trying to claim human mining rights. The Corvani admitted they had been wrong to demand human agricultural worlds, Even species that had not directly threatened humanity spoke up to promise they would never make the same mistakes as the Velkari and Thraxians. But the most important moment came when a young alien from a species that humans had never heard of stood up to speak. She was small and covered in silver fur with large eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. "My people live on the far edge of the galaxy," she said in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "We have watched what happened here, and we have learned something important. The humans did not become powerful by conquering others. They became powerful by conquering themselves. They defeated their own violent nature, and that made them stronger than any weapon." President Dayun nodded appreciatively. "That is exactly right. The greatest enemy humanity ever faced was our own capacity for destruction. When we learned to control that, we became capable of things that pure warriors could never achieve." As the meeting came to an end, the representatives filed out in thoughtful silence. The galaxy had been changed forever by what they had witnessed. They had learned that true strength sometimes wore the mask of gentleness, that the most fearsome predators were often those who chose to be protectors instead. From that day forward, no species would ever again mistake human patience for weakness. The quiet farmers from the small blue world had revealed themselves to be sleeping giants, who had chosen to dream of peace instead of nightmares of war. And in that revelation, the galaxy had discovered what it truly meant to respect those who were strong enough to be gentle. The age of underestimating humanity was over. The age of understanding what humans really were had begun, and the galaxy would spend the next 1,000 years remembering the lesson they had learned when humanity's patience finally broke. In the end, they realized that the humans had given them the greatest gift possible. They had shown them that it was possible to be strong without being cruel, powerful without being destructive, and victorious without being violent. And that gift would change the galaxy forever.